Good morning, everyone. I am Sneha here, and I am representing the Behavioural Insights student group, and we're hosting the talk today. It's an absolute honor to introduce Cass Sunstein, or Professor Cass Sunstein, to many of us. He's a professor at the Harvard Law School at the moment. As we all know, he is a pioneer at the intersection of law, economics, and behavioral sciences. Professor Sunstein is also a recipient of the prestigious Holberg Prize, which and has served in influential positions, including as the administrator of the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. Today, he will delve into his latest book, co-authored with neuroscience professor Tali Sharot, titled Look Again, The Power of Noticing What Was Always There. This work challenges us to break free from the habituation that dims the vibrancy of our daily experiences. And through an incisive look at how we can become accustomed to the mundane and the extraordinary alike, the book explores strategies to disrupt our routines, rejuvenate our perceptions, and lead more fulfilling lives. And it's also exciting to know that Professor Sunstein is a fan or appreciates Labrador retrievers, which is very exciting. With that, I think I will hand it over to you, Professor Sunstein, to take it from here.
Okay, it's a complete thrill to get to talk to you all, and I'm seeing Seoul, where I've spent considerable time, Berlin, where I spent a ton of time. I completely love Berlin and know it well, and Toronto, where I was recently. Hello, Brazil, which I have not visited. I hope to in the fullness of time, and the same is true of Saudi Arabia, with whom I spoke with some behavioral scientists quite recently. So hi to everyone. Maybe we can put the slides on because my ability to improvise is limited.
Yes, and also, sorry, just a note to the participants, you can add any questions that you might have throughout the talk in the Q&A box. And
Okay, so here are the slides. There's a human brain, and the importance of the human brain on this opening slide is that we're speaking today about something extremely fundamental to all living creatures, something that's received very little attention, at least in applied behavioral science. And I'm keenly aware that what I'm going to talk about is a little bit like exploring foundation stones for an assortment of research and policies, research projects and policies that haven't been done yet. So we're talking about foundation stones rather than applied public policy, hence the brain. Next slide. Okay, so this is from a great science fiction writer, not a behavioral scientist, but someone who had an understanding of human behavior. This is from a novel called The Island of Dr. Moreau, in which the narrator encounters creatures who are mixtures of human beings and other species. And while that might seem comical and a little absurd, Wells is a very good writer and he makes it scary. And his narrator says, 1,000 things which had seemed unnatural and repulsive speedily became natural and ordinary to me. I suppose everything in existence takes its color from the average hue of our surroundings. This is a little half paragraph about people's ability to habituate to things that are quite terrible, including monstrous things, and take this statement about the speed of habituation as a signal of how in English-speaking countries and French-speaking countries and hello, Canada and Toronto, and countries that speak Spanish and Arabic, things that aren't very good, we can get used to and basically stop noticing. Next slide. This is from an environmentalist who said, one way to open your eyes is to ask yourself, what if I had never seen this before? What if I knew I would never see it again? That's a plea for not habituating indicating probably, I'm hopeful, that in every place where everyone on this call is, there's something extraordinarily good that we take as furniture. And if we ask ourselves, what if we had never seen this before? Maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a memento, maybe it's something beautiful. It would have a kind of life and vibrancy that it wouldn't otherwise have because we're used to it. Next slide. This is from a guy named Heschel, who says an individual dies when he or she ceases to be surprised. I am surprised every morning when I see the sunshine and when I see the sun rise. That's an urging that what Wells wrote in his science fiction novel won't happen quite so much to us. It's a plea for surprise. Next. Okay, this is all relevant to creativity, to innovation, to deciding how to work and deciding how to decide. There's a lot of dishabituation happening in Argentina. There's a lot happening in Canada. There's a lot happening in Saudi Arabia. Good dishabituation ensures that we're able to take distance from our current practices and maybe try something that is extremely promising. Next slide. Okay, there's an owl, and the owl is looking suspicious. And the reason is this is an owl who believes in truth, and the owl is startled by lying. Next slide. I'm going to tell you what this slide is about, so don't worry too much about the words. This is an experiment from 2016 in which ordinary people, there's no reason to think they're different from any other people, were told you have an opportunity to participate in an experiment. And in this experiment, if you cooperate with a stranger who's a teammate, you can both make money. So people are going into a laboratory with an opportunity to make money if they cooperate with someone they've never met before. Then a number of them are told, well, actually, if you lie to your partner, you'll make more money. The word lie wasn't used, but it's clear that was what the incentive was. More money if you lie. Money if you cooperate, more money if you lie. Okay, ask yourself, what do you think people would do? It turns out people do lie. A lot of people lie to make money. It's not a horrible lie. It's just a lie in an experimental setting in which they make money. But here's the noteworthy thing. As they lie, their brains are connected to a monitor, and the amygdala in the brain is on fire when they lie. So the amygdala, which measures emotional arousal, is keenly aroused. When people start lying, the amygdala is crying out, no. And maybe we've all had the experience of either being inclined to lie or even lying when something in our head, our brain, is signaling with a very bright red light, this is wrong. Okay, here's what happens as the experiment continues. The amygdala starts to quiet down as people lie. The more people lie, the more they get used to lying, and the more the amygdala starts to say, okay, I guess we lie. This is a case study in habituation, where people get accustomed to their own dishonesty to the point where the emotional centers of the brain that are alert to dishonesty or corruption are softened in their reaction. And at the end of the day, nothing from the amygdala. This is a study of the neural foundations of why acts of dishonesty can escalate as people habituate to their own misconduct. If you think about things that have happened in my country, the United States, involving dishonesty on the part of, let's say, people involved in business, it's very reasonable to think that they are kind of living exemplars of the quieting of the amygdala in response to dishonesty, and having habituated to their own dishonesty, there's no red light, and they end up doing things which are actually very, very dishonest. Next slide. Okay, this is our second example. It's less alarming, though it's concerning. Imagine you get to be on a beach like that. You get to have a vacation. Maybe you're leaving Buenos Aires, and there's a very nice vacation spot. I was in Argentina not long ago. There's a very beautiful place not far away. And you're going to that beautiful place, and let's say you're going to be there for 10 days. What's the best time? What do people like most? There's actually data on this, and the magical hour is the 43rd hour. That's what people like best. The reason is after the 43rd hour, people start to habituate to the beach. They really like it. They like the ocean. They like the hotel. They like champagne. They always like champagne, but the champagne is less wonderful and less amazing on the fourth day than it was on the second day, and it's less amazing still on the sixth day. Diminishing sensitivity to the stimulus, where in this case, the stimulus isn't something distressing like one's own dishonesty, it's something wonderful, a vacation. And ask yourself, if you do a qualitative test and ask people what part of the vacation do they like best, what do you think is the one word that people would say most? It's clear. The data is overwhelming. The word is first. The first time I saw the beach, the first time I saw the hotel, the first time I strolled in someplace really beautiful. The first is the surprise signal firing in the brain. And there, in this case, it's one that's extremely positive. Next slide. Okay. If I told you something untrue, let me tell you something untrue, shall I, about sports? If you follow American football, Peyton Manning is the greatest quarterback in the history of American football. The reason he's the greatest, Peyton Manning, is he has the best arm. Okay, I just lied. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback in the history of American football. I tried to choose an innocuous lie, but I repeated the lie. I said it twice. The power of misinformation comes in part from the illusory truth effect, which shows it's a very strong finding in laboratory and real world settings, that if people are told something untrue twice, and even more 3 or 4 times, they tend to think it's true, even if they have no particular reason to believe it's true. And even if when they first hear it, they think that can't be true, that's startling. Why is the illusory truth effect present? The best explanation is that if something is easy to process, people tend to believe it's credible. That if something's hard to process, there's a signal in the brain of maybe not. If it's easy to process, then people think familiar, truthier. The surprise signal is softened when people have heard something 2 or more times, and that means that the critical faculties in the mind are not alert, and that can be, a very good thing for humanity to have. If you hear 2 or 3 times there's a lion coming, run, you better run, but it can create some terrible problems. Next slide. Okay, in all of these cases, the defining characteristic of habituation is the surprise signal. Let's linger over that a little bit. You have, that is, everyone on this call has, an ancestor who is my ancestor too. So we're all related. And our ancient ancestor is a unicellular bacteria, really small, no legs, can't talk, can't sing, can't jump, but can swim. And our ancestor was stationary and immobile in the face of constant circumstance. In the face of change, our ancestor would start to move. And that's evolutionarily a good thing, that if you're okay to stay where you are is basically smart. if there's something new coming, to have the brain on the alert is helpful to survival. Next slide. Okay, so here's a true story about two people, Julia and Rachel. Let's say they both live in Toronto, to make it, this is a Canadian story. And Julia and Rachel are the same. They have enough resources to have a good life. They have a family. They love their family. Rachel is sad and a little bored. Julia is happy and a little thrilled. Their lives are otherwise the same. Let's tell you something about, this is a true story. Let's tell you a little something about Julia. Next slide. Are you, were you on tenterhooks about what you're going to learn from Julia? This is true about Julia. Julia lives in a nice place. You can see the background. She explains why she likes her life, saying that although it has a lot of routine in it, I go away and I miss it so much, then I come back and resparkles. If I was here for a long time doing the same thing, that is attending to her family, it probably wouldn't have pixie dust on it. Take Julia as urging that the reason she loves her life is that it resparkles because her job takes her away from her routine. And when she comes back, it's great. There was someone else, someone who was in the same line of work as Julia, by the way, who said, after we published the book, that is very recently, said, I have to go away too in my life. And when I come back, I love it so much. And she said, avocados are amazing. Okay, now I'm going to tell you who Julia is. Next slide. You may recognize her. That's Julia Roberts, the actor. So this is a true story. Rachel is actually a composite who has a life which is in many ways like Julia's, but she's in a bit of a midlife crisis. The colors in her life have turned gray. That doesn't happen for Julia because she goes away. Next slide. Okay, the midlife crisis, which Rachel is suffering from, is found all over the world. Sometimes it happens at 50s, sometimes it happens in 60s, sometimes it happens in 40s. What's it about? Well, I talked about colors turning gray. There's actually an effect discovered in Austria a couple hundred years ago, where if you stare at a colored object with colored clouds around, and there's a fixation point in the middle that's kind of like that, you stare at the fixation point, the colors will actually turn gray. And if you're really good at it, they'll turn white. So the brain doesn't register colors if you're just staring at something in the middle that's an object. That's how the mind works. This is a tale that tells us something about the source of a midlife crisis. If you're 20, you might fall in love tomorrow, or you might have your heart broken the day after tomorrow. You might learn something that will completely change your career course. It might be you'll be startled by learning about something that will suggest everything you thought wasn't right. You might move to another city. You might have a new job. If you're in your 50s around the world, many people are doing just fine, but their life is colorless. And that is literally depressing. The absence of change and surprise signal often sends people into a downward spiral. Next slide. There's an old television show about a character named Henry Valentine. That's the episode of the show, who was a criminal who's shot by the police and dies and finds himself in a mysterious place with an apparent angel next to him saying, "What would you like, Mr. Valentine? You can have anything. What would you like?" And Henry Valentine says, "I was a criminal. I wasn't a very good person. How did I end up in heaven? I should be, I wasn't good." And the angel says, "Mr. Valentine, you can have whatever you want." And Valentine says, "I want to be rich. I want to have a lot of money." And he gets a lot of money. And then Valentine says, "I want to live in the most amazing apartment." And his angel, who's called Pip, says, "Okay, here's your apartment. Then Valentine says, I want all the women to be in love with me. I just want that. And that happens. And then Valentine says, I want to go gambling and I want to win. And Pip says, okay, Mr. Valentine, that's what you've got. After a couple of weeks, Valentine starts to be miserable and to lose his mind and says, I can't stand it anymore. I want to go to the other place. And Pip looks at him and says, oh, Mr. Valentine, this is the other place. That's a brilliant episode of television. It fits with something a great economist said after basically this episode of the show, which is that pleasure comes from the intermittent and occasional satisfaction of desire. Intermittent and occasional satisfaction of desire. Valentine habituated. Next slide. Okay, so I was seated at a wedding a number of years ago with a therapist, professor type named Esther Perel. Her presence at a wedding is ominous because she's a therapy of dead marriages. The therapist of dead marriages, that's what her line of work is. She's very nice at dinner. And her line about why marriages kind of turn gray is fire needs air. Desire butts heads with habit and repetition. So her claim is within marriages, things turn gray because people habituate to one another. That has implications for work. It has implications for government. It has strong implications for business. Next slide. Okay, let's talk about that, work and life. Next slide. What do people care about? There's research that is inspired by Jeremy Bentham, suggesting, not shockingly, that people want to be happy. Pleasure is great, pain is bad. And that has produced a lot of behavioral research on subjective happiness. We have data in Saudi Arabia, in Canada, in Brazil, in Argentina, in the United States, in Germany, in France and Italy, and many other places about levels of subjective well-being, with happiness playing a large role. People will sacrifice happiness for the sake of meaning. I encountered a friend in the White House about 10 years ago and asked him how he was. I expected fine or not good. It was quick passing in the hallway. And his answer was, well, in terms of happiness, I'm terrible. It's awful. But in terms of meaning, I'm wonderful. It's couldn't be better. So he gave me a little academic dissertation about the difference between happiness and meaning. Many people who are engaged in meaningful work aren't smiling a whole lot, but they have a lot of life satisfaction. Many people who are very happy are smiling a great deal, but they don't think their life is particularly meaningful. The research I want to draw your attention to, the exciting new research, suggests that people will sacrifice both happiness and meaning for variety, also known as psychological richness. So if you ask people what they want in life, lots of different things, like a week in Argentina, as I was privileged to have, or a semester in Ireland, or a business opportunity in Berlin. People will be thrilled by that and want that, even if they lose something in terms of happiness, and potentially even if they lose something in terms of meaning. And one reason people are smart to care about variety is you can habituate to what makes you happy. You can habituate to what gives you meaning. If you're engaged in charitable works, maybe the sense of meaningfulness will be very high the first 2 years, but after a few years, not so much. I'm thinking right now, I have a close family member who's engaged in very meaningful work. This is not my wife, it's someone else. Very meaningful work, who is just thrilled to pieces by it. But my guess is that she will be less thrilled in 5 years, somewhat thrilled, but less thrilled. People can't habituate to variety. Variety definition means change. Next slide. Okay, work and life 2. Next slide. Good experiences, like a Taylor Swift song, and I hope you all agree that's a Taylor Swift song, or a massage, which some people like, are better if they're broken up. the data suggests that if there's a good experience, to break it up into 2 or 3 parts, people don't expect that to be better. They don't want it to be broken up, but it is better. 90% of people think, I don't want to have a broken up musical experience. I want to hear the whole thing through. But if it's broken up, they like it better. So too for massages. The reason, I hope if you're tracking, is clear. A good experience, if broken up, becomes a place of dishabituation. The 3rd minute of a Taylor Swift song, if you like Taylor Swift, if you don't, is Bach a composer? Was there a composer named Bach? I'm being ridiculous here. Some people don't like Taylor Swift, but do like Bach. To have that broken up, you aren't enjoying it less because you've habituated to it. It's broken. Then you come back to it and it's new, the surprise signal. Bach is amazing. Taylor Swift is astounding. This is true for good experiences in general. Next slide. Bad experiences like cleaning up a room, or if you're in business or law, dealing with an unpleasant client, motor through. The reason is people get used to the bad experience and it's not so bad once they're in the middle of it. They're diminishing sensitivity to the stimulus. And this is also profoundly counterintuitive. I'm in the midst of moving myself, and the idea of motoring through moving is not very pleasant, but breaking it up into 3 stages, that's worse. Next slide. Okay, in business, next slide, and in government, lying is a thing in many parts of the world, regrettably. Next slide. What are we going to do about it? NIITB. That's an acronym invented for this occasion. Nip it in the bud. To allow some, rather to impose a taboo on any, is to risk the weakening of the amygdala, which is why what sometimes seems harsh, which is to have at least some sanction for any corruption, is possibly a very good idea. Okay, next slide. You're ahead of me. Thank you. And this is the 3rd and final of the work and life cases. It's coming. Next slide. Is creativity. There's a high jumper. Next slide. If you don't like sports, bear with me for a moment. We're only going to spend a little bit of time. See that extremely odd jump? That is the jump that was invented by someone named Dick Fosbury. It was called the Fosbury flop. It's a new way of doing the high jump. It was regarded at the time as crazy. People were laughing at him for jumping this way. He had dishabituated to the standard way of jumping, in part because he was an engineer as well as an aspiring athlete. They stopped laughing when he won the Olympic gold and set the world record. Next slide. That's my colleague and friend Dick Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize. He is the brother from another mother of Dick Fosbury. He created his own kind of flop, which is the use of psychology and economics. He was able to do that because while Fosbury wasn't an amazing athlete, Thaler wasn't an amazingly proficient economist, and both of them needed something a little different. And they looked from the outside, dishabituated to the standard way, and there we got profound creativity. Next slide. Okay, COVID had a population of people, let's call them the Janes of the world, who habituated quickly to the new circumstances of the shutdown and were, in terms of emotional well-being, collapsing in the first month and then restored after a month or so. Most people were like Jane, sudden this, but then this. About 8 to 10% of people were like John, went down and stayed down. What distinguishes them? Okay, why did people show extraordinary resilience, except for a subpopulation that stayed in a kind of emotional trough? Next slide. A unifying characteristic of mental illness, and the Johns, in the case I gave, suffer from depression, is that they struggle to habituate. So schizophrenics, people who suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder, people who suffer from anxiety and depression share a characteristic of extreme difficulty in habituating. That's a defining feature of the emotional challenge, which suggests habituation can be a blessing and not a curse. Next slide. Okay, here's some bad things. Prepare yourself. Next slide. Cruelty, meanness, authoritarianism, and misinformation. Those are four not ideal things. Next slide. How do they become possible and sustain themselves? Right? Important question. And you can think of something, maybe at a university that's inefficient or harsh, or you can think of something in the world that's really terrible. And you can take your favorite choice right now. Climate change, maybe something else. Next slide. Here's an extreme illustrative case, if you'll permit. Next slide. Hitler. And shout out now to Berlin, which has been such a beacon for the world over the past decades in its exemplification of the idea of human dignity, which is in the German Constitution. It's in the first sentence, I think. And let's just note that all countries, or almost all countries, have had something horrible. Certainly my country, which has had slavery. That's, I'm not sure there are words, but let's just note that all countries have had something either not good or extremely not good. Work on fascism in the 1930s shows the following. Next slide. This is a quotation from someone who was there under Hitler. We had no time to think about these dreadful things that were growing little by little around us. Stunningly, he referred to my word, the gradual habituation of the people little by little. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, or on occasion regretted, that people could no more see it developing from day to day than a farmer in his field sees the corn growing. One day it is over his head. That's beautiful, isn't it? About how bad things can proceed slowly and incrementally to the point where they're really horrifying. And people wouldn't have tolerated them if the growth had been immediate, but it was slow. Next slide. Okay, let's talk, shall we, about dishabituation entrepreneurs, a term. These are people who either because of their nature or because of their travels are able to see things from a distance. Martin Luther King was a dishabituation entrepreneur in my country, saying both to white people and Black people, look at what you're living with. He held up a kind of mirror that was very, very vivid for white people, but also to some extent for Black people who had habituated, to some extent, saying, look what the world you're living with is from a distance. This is not normal. The monsters are not things which you should be asked to live with. Next slide. This is Catherine McKinnon, less famous. The idea of sexual harassment, she's more responsible than anyone for putting into legal and popular consciousness. She wrote a book in 1985 called Sexual Harassment of Working Women. I remember that book. I was around during the time of that book. And the book did two things. First, it made a radical legal argument, a profoundly dishabituating legal argument, that if women are sexually harassed, they're being discriminated against. Because if there were men, they wouldn't be sexually harassed. Now, well, that's a very logically compelling argument. It was radical stuff. The idea that sexual harassment was a form of discrimination, that was new. She also offered narratives of sexual harassment. And after reading them, no reader could think that's a monster that's normal. Any reader would think, my gosh, this happens in our world? The combination of the narrative, the dishabituating narrative, and the legal argument produced a situation where a unanimous Supreme Court of the United States in just a few years in an opinion by a very conservative justice, agreed with her. That exercise in dishabituation created a new normal. Next slide. Steve Jobs in business was a big-time dishabituation entrepreneur, suggesting that the world of technology that he intervened in was not normal. And the new regime, let's call it, that he instituted would work better. He's a little bit like the Dick Fosbury, the inventor of the jump in business. Next slide. Okay, here are some lessons. Resparkling is possible by taking a break, imaginative or real, and revealing that something wonderful is exactly that and not to be taken as background noise, or that something not wonderful is to be seen as a monster rather than something normal. The word psychological richness is not the best term. It's a little bit like a card that people send to one another on holidays, a little too sentimental, but it might be the best idea. Dishabituation is doable and profoundly valuable. Next slide. Creativity and innovation often come from an exercise in dishabituation. And in my field, the world of behavioral science, that's almost a daily occurrence because behavioral science breeds a sense of the surprises that are in the familiar. Next slide. Breaking up good things is an excellent thing to do. Surprising, I have to keep telling myself that. And motoring through the bad, I really have to tell myself that on moving week. This is moving week for me. Forgive me for a little personal statement. Doing that is right. Next slide. A pervasive problem for people with mental health issues is a failure to habituate, which suggests that habituation and resilience are hand in glove. Next slide. Here's a story from the White House. That's me with President Obama, and it's in the last weeks of his presidency, actually. And we were talking about his presidency. And one thing that in the White House, President Obama was very alert to is that the challenges that the world faces, it might be the Middle East, which had challenges then, not the same by any means as now, but certainly challenges. It might be climate change. It might be crime. It might be poverty. It might be health. It might be economic opportunity. It might be education. It might be safety. It might be pandemics. That the challenges are so big that his advisors would often be a little abashed at the inadequacy of our solutions. And the president, this president, whatever you think of him, he was very alert to the emotional dynamic of a room. And when his advisors were a little daunted by the magnitude of the problem, he would look at us like the best father you could imagine and say 3 words: better is good. Better is good. Meaning you might not be able to save 1 million people, but if you can save 1,000 people, that's good. It may be that you can't solve the problem, let's say, of climate change or immigration or the Middle East, but you can do something that makes it meaningfully better for some number of people. Better is good. Next slide. Those are the words. And final slide. 2 words that are dishabituating because they remind the person who says them of the good fortune of being able to have an experience that calls forth gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Really enjoyed the presentation. We'll quickly move on to Q&A. in the interest of time. Second. Yeah, so I guess the first question we have is, to what extent do political candidates who lie count on voters habituating to their mendaciousness? Based on your remarks, Professor Sunstein, is dishabituation therefore an appropriate counter-narrative?
Yeah, that's great. So some politicians, we're not going to name names, this is not a political session, but think of people who say things that aren't true. There are two things I think they count on. One is the illusory truth effect, where if something's repeated, people tend to believe it. And the other is called truth bias. So if you're in a place that's unfamiliar and you're asked, how do I get to the museum? And they say, turn right, turn left, then you can't miss it. You ordinarily will turn right, turn left and expect to see the museum. You won't think that they're lying and trying to get you lost. So human beings tend to think that statements are truthful unless they know something about the context or the source that suggests it's not. Truth bias and the illusory truth effect are a really powerful combination. And those who are mendacious and know they're mendacious do count on them. The appropriate counter narrative, that's such a great question. Thank you for that. And there's a repertoire of tools. One thing to do is if you can discredit the source. So if you know that anyone who criticizes Tom Brady or Taylor Swift, these are two of my favorites. If you criticize Taylor Brady or Taylor Brady, no, they're not married. Taylor is dating another football player. Taylor and Brady apparently is divorced and not dating Taylor Swift. No bad rumors here. Taylor Swift and Tom Brady, anyone who just says something bad about them is likely to be lying. If that can be ingrained in the culture, and I'm making my best effort here to do that, then the lies will be self-refuting. And you can think of less absurd examples of that. Maybe with respect to some social problems, that's actually succeeded.
We have another question on habituation to negative situations. So on pushing through, isn't there a point where this becomes untrue? To what extent can you habituate when the negative stimulus is very strong and feels overwhelming? In such situations, wouldn't it be better to break it out into separate parts that you can tackle one by one?
Okay, that's the second part is clearly true. So let's suppose you don't dishabituate to the experience of having some work done on your teeth. So you're a dentist and it's an unpleasant thing and you don't habituate to it. It's awful all the time. Then breaking it up has a certain charm. And if it's the case that you habituate some, so it's less awful in minute 20 than in minute 3, if it's still awful, to break it up might be smart. Now, it's a fabulous question. It suggests, A, there are people who habituate less than other people, and they're not all struggling with mental illness. There may be people who struggle very hard to habituate to loud noises, who aren't depressed or anxious. They just have a hard time doing that. And then breaking it up might be a good idea. And it might also, it is the case that some things people habituate to less than other things. So, and in the book, we're very interested in this. The data is coming in. I would have said that acute pain people don't habituate to. My co-author, who's a neuroscientist, says you really have to be very careful about that because people can habituate to pain. Some bad experiences, the magnitude of the habituation is less than it is with, for example, olfactory neurons, where if you go into a room with a lot of smoke, the first minutes will be really bad. But 20 or 30 minutes in, a number of people won't even detect the smell anymore. And if that seems incredible, it's true. And I'll make it more credible. Haven't we all gone swimming in cold, or many of us at least, in cold water where the first 2 minutes are barely bearable, and even jumping in is hard. And then 12 minutes in, you don't notice. You say, come on in, the water's fine. That's because we habituate to the cold.
I guess one last question, again regarding dishonesty. Is there a way to make dishonest people who've already gotten used to lying, and the amygdala stopped triggering any actions back to the original state? And how might we do that?
It's great. So I have on my door, which is approximately 2 meters from here, a statement from an interview with Daniel Kahneman, who recently died, said it's not a matter of thinking and it's an empirical question, and I don't have the evidence. It's a little absurd to have that on one's door, but I actually do. And that's to remind myself that things are empirical questions and one should be careful about speculating. The data on habituation generally shows that critical distancing in the form of a break creates dishabituation. So if you have someone who's lied a lot, to take them out of the domain in which they're lying for a little while, and maybe to have some conversation with them about lying, can restore the amygdala's negative reaction. Now, it is true, let's take this as an analogy, that if you go into cold water and it's no longer cold and then come out for 45 minutes and then you go back, the first 2 minutes, it's going to be really cold again. And the same is true for a smoke-filled room. So that's the kind of the umbrella of analysis of how to get people who habituated to their own misconduct. Can I tell you a story? I'll tell you a story. I had a friend in the White House in the Obama administration who was really mean. He was in a leadership position. He had superb judgment. He was really unkind. He was very harsh to people. And people didn't like working for or with him, though they respected and admired him. And I admired him, but he was very harsh. And I saw him about 4 months later and had lunch with him, and he was lovely and just the nicest person. And I kind of very lightly referred to his government experience and what he thought. And he said, I can't believe I acted like that. He said it less with shame than with astonishment that he had acted so, harshly. And that's not about corruption. There was nothing corrupt about him, but he was mean. And his own meanness he was distanced from because he took a break.
All right. I think with that, we will end here. Thank you so much, Professor, for your time. This was a lovely talk, and we hope to have you back very soon with your next book. Where can people buy the book? Because we know that it's out now.
Okay, so the book is called Look Again, and it was a labor of love. And my co-author is an amazing writer, Tali Sharot. Her co-author is a serviceable writer, but she's an amazing writer. You can find it. They have this big bookstore that's online. What's it called? Ulysses or the Congo? No, Amazon. It's called Amazon. That has independent bookstores, of course, we love. I'm hopeful that it's being translated in many languages. I'm hopeful that it's available in London. It does have I just see Hello London. I go to London often. There's a UK edition, so it should be easily available there. I'm hopeful that it's available in Germany. I think the German edition is coming out, but English, I'm hoping is available there. Independent bookstores, we love, love, love. All stores should have it, if not stores, online sources. And in Argentina and Saudi Arabia and Canada, I hope it's very easy to find. It has this memorable, though a little bit too steady title, not a provocative title. Look Again. That's the theme of the book.
Thank you so much. And to the audience, thank you so much for your amazing questions. And you can keep in touch with whatever we're doing in the future by subscribing to our newsletter on the Shorenstein newsletter. Great. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thanks
Thank you,
all.
Professor. Thank you.
Oh.